Okay, so I want you to start by picturing two images in your head. Just hold them there for a second.
Okay.
On one side, you've got the absolute pinnacle of 1950s Hollywood glamour.
Okay.
Blonde curls, red lips, that white dress blowing up over a subway grate, you know the one. The American dream, basically, in a dress.
Marilyn Monroe, no question.
Exactly. Now, on the other side of your mind, picture the total opposite. The gritty, terrifying, the underbelly of the late 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
A wild-eyed cult leader, swastika carved into his forehead. The man who, you could argue, pretty much put a bullet in the head of the whole free love movement.
Charles Manson.
Charles Manson. Now, here's the thing. Smash those two images together, what do you get?
You get a thesis statement. You get a brand.
A brand. That's a good way to put it.
You get a guy who decided that those two figures, the ultimate sex symbol and the ultimate serial killer, are, in the eyes of the American public, kind of the same thing. You get Marilyn Manson.
And that's our deep dive today. We are not just talking about a rock star who wore spooky contact lenses and ripped fishnets.
No, not at all.
We are looking at a figure who, for, 30 years, acted as a sort of heat-seeking missile for American outrage. Whatever the culture was afraid of, he became it.
It is a massive story. And I'm looking at our sources here. The stack of research and the trajectory is, it's frankly exhausting to even look at.
It really is.
We're going from a super strict Christian school in Canton, Ohio, all the way to the absolute heights of MTV fame, then to being the dead center of the Columbine hysteria, and then finally
into the courtroom.
Into the courtroom battles of the 2020s, where that whole monster persona suddenly had very, very real and very serious legal consequences.
And that is really the mission today, isn't it? When you try and figure out how Brian Warner, who was basically a nerdy journalism student, how he constructed this Marilyn Manson character, how he used it to manipulate the media, the public, everyone, and then the big question, whether in the end the character actually consumed the man.
And we have to ask that hard question. When you build your entire career on being the villain, what happens when the world finally turns around and decides you actually are one?
Let's start at the very beginning. Because usually when you hear about these shock rockers, you expect, the cliche, a broken home, life on the streets, that kind of thing.
Right, the standard tortured artist backstory.
But Brian Warner's origin story is, it's surprisingly suburban.
It is. So he was born in 1969, Canton, Ohio, Brian Hugh Warner. His background is this mix of English, German, Irish, even some Sioux heritage in there.
And his parents.
His father, Hugh, was Catholic. His mom, Barbara, was Episcopal. But the key detail in all the early notes, the thing that really seems to have wired his brain for everything that came later, is where he went to school.
Heritage Christian School.
Exactly, from 1st to 10th grade. And you have to understand that this was not just a say your prayers before lunch kind of place.
Yeah.
This was deep, authoritarian, fear-based religious instruction. The whole 9 yards.
There's this one specific detail in the research that I just love because the irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. It feels like it's out of a movie script.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about.
The instructors there, they had a very specific curriculum when it came to music.
They did. They would hold these seminars and they'd play rock music for the kids. Bands like Black Sabbath, Queen, Led Zeppelin.
The classics of evil.
Right. And they would analyze the lyrics with the kids, line by line, to show them exactly how satanic and how evil this music was.
Which, if you know anything at all about teenage psychology...
It's the biggest mistake you could possibly make. It's like telling someone, whatever you do, don't think about a pink elephant.
Of course.
They thought they were inoculating these kids against the devil's music. But for Brian Warner, it was just a shopping list.
He's just sitting there taking notes.
He's sitting there listening to these forbidden sounds. And instead of being repulsed, he's thinking, wow, this sounds incredible. And if these authority figures hate it this much, it must be really powerful.
So the school, in trying to demonize it, actually handed him the blueprint for his entire career.
100%.
Yeah.
They taught him exactly which buttons to push to make religious conservatives absolutely lose their minds. They handed him the manual.
He learned early on that fear is a form of control, but it's also a form of attention.
That's it. If you can terrify the authority figure, you have a strange kind of power over them.
So he eventually gets picked out, or he leaves. It's a bit unclear. He moves to a public school, and then the whole family relocates to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And this is the part of the timeline that I think a lot of people just skip over.
Yeah.
He doesn't just grab a microphone and start screaming into it. He goes to college.
Right, Broward Community College.
Yeah.
And what he majors in is crucial: journalism.
Journalism.
So he isn't just an angry kid with a guitar. He's an intellectual kid who is actively analyzing how the media machine works. He gets a job at a music magazine called 25th Parallel.
And look at who he's interviewing. It's not, the local garage bands trying to make it.
No, no. He is talking to the heavy hitters of the whole industrial and alternative scene. He interviews Groovy Man from My Life with a Thrill Kill Cult. And then, the big one. He interviews Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails.
I mean, that is a meeting your destiny moment if I've ever heard one.
It really was. But think about the dynamic there. He's the interviewer. He is studying Reznor. He's asking questions about image, about manipulation, about how you construct a persona.
He's learning the mechanics of fame from the other side of the notepad.
Exactly. He's seeing that it's all a construct, it's all manufactured. And he's thinking, I can do that.
So when he finally decides to start his own band in 1989, Marilyn Manson and the Spooky Kids, he's already treating it like a media project, not just, four guys in a room making noise.
Precisely. He teams up with a guitarist named Scott Patesky, who takes on the name Daisy Berkowitz.
And there's that naming convention again?
Right there from day one. Daisy Duke, the all-American sex symbol, and David Berkowitz, the son of Sam Killer. The concept was locked in from the very beginning.
And the early shows they were doing in South Florida, spectacle feels like a very polite word for it.
Oh, yeah?
The notes mention things like amateur pyrotechnics, band members in lingerie.
Naked women nailed to crucifixes, children locked in cages on stage. I mean, it was pure shock theater.
It sounds like an absolute fever dream.
It was performance art designed to completely bypass your critical brain and go straight for the gut. They wanted a reaction.
Any reaction.
Disgust, fear, arousal. It didn't matter as long as it wasn't boredom. Boredom was the enemy.
There is one story from that era that I think just perfectly encapsulates his whole psychological approach to the audience. The donkey piñata.
Oh, this is classic early Manson. It's so clever in its own twisted way.
So set the scene. It's a crowded, sweaty club in Florida. He hangs a piñata over the audience, and he puts a stick on the edge of the stage. But he doesn't tell them, hey, come up and hit it.
No, he does the opposite. He gets on the microphone and starts pleading with them, please don't hurt this piñata. It's innocent. Whatever you do, don't do it.
Which is just daring them. It's a reverse psychology 101.
Of course. The crowd sees the stick, they see the piñata, and the guy on stage is telling them no. So the mob mentality just takes over instantly. Someone grabs the stick and they just smash the thing to absolute pieces.
And they're all expecting candy to fall out.
And instead, they get showered with butcher shop refuse, cow brains, pig intestines, just unidentifiable organs raining down on them.
That is just repulsive.
It is. But look at the lesson he's teaching them. He proved that the crowd's destructive impulse was their own. They were the ones who chose to smash it. He explicitly told them to stop.
He made them complicit in their own horror.
That is the Marilyn Manson experience in a nutshell. I'm just holding up a mirror. You're the ones reflecting something ugly back.
Clearly, that level of intelligence and that absolute willingness to cross every single line, it caught Trent Reznor's attention.
Big time. Reznor signs them to his label, Nothing Records, in 1993.
They dropped the Spooky Kids from the name. It's just Marilyn Manson now. And we get the debut album, Portrait of an American Family.
Which was a solid industrial record.
Yeah.
It was very sample-heavy, very kitschy, full of these weird audio clips from old movies.
But it wasn't the big breakthrough.
No, the real breakthrough comes with the remix EP that followed, Smells Like Children. And specifically, one track on that EP, the cover of the Eurythmics' Sweet Dreams, are made of this.
I still remember seeing that video for the first time on MTV. It was terrifying. Manson in a tutu riding a pig, just looking like a glitch in reality.
It was inescapable.
And the song itself is so much slower, so much sludgier than the original.
That was the genius of it.
Yeah.
He took this shiny, bouncing 80s synth pop hit, and he stripped all the joy and gloss out of it. He just left the creepy, voyeuristic lyrics exposed.
Some of them want to abuse you. Some of them want to be abused.
When Annie Lennox sang it, it sounded cynical and cool. When Manson sang it, it sounded like an actual threat.
And that video with that song just blew up. It put them on the map.
It did. It set the stage for what many fans now call the triptych. 3 albums that completely define his career and his impact.
Antichrist Superstar, Mechanical Animals, and Hollywood.
This is where the band moves from being a sort of cult sideshow to a genuine main event. And it starts with Antichrist Superstar in 1996, produced again by Trent Reznor. This is the Boogeyman era.
The music on this album, it's just oppressive. It's so dense and abrasive.
It's industrial metal at its absolute peak. You've got these heavily distorted guitars, processed drums, and Manson's vocals, which we should probably talk about technically for a second.
Yeah, let's dig into that, because a lot of people just dismiss him as a shouter, but the notes here mention he's actually a baritone with a pretty massive range.
A 3-octave range, yeah. He can go from a really low, grumbling vocal, what's called the fry register, all the way up to a piercing whistle register scream. He had a lot of tools in his vocal toolbox.
But there's this really weird detail in the technical notes about something called the pentagram theory.
Right.
This sounds like pure marketing spin, but lay it on me.
So the claim, and this supposedly came from a mixing engineer who worked on the album, is that Manson uses 5 very distinct vocal tones or textures in his singing.
Okay.
And if you run his isolated vocal tracks through a phrasal analyzer, the frequency spikes that show up on the screen actually form the geometric shape of a pentagram.
Okay, that has to be a myth. That just sounds way too convenient to be true.
It's almost certainly a studio legend that he happily encouraged. It's great marketing. But even if it isn't literally true, it speaks to how meticulously constructed the sound was.
Nothing was accidental.
Nothing. The distortion, the whispering, the sudden screams, it was all designed specifically to unsettle you on a subconscious level.
And it absolutely worked. The album debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200. It was a massive commercial hit. But the backlash was immediate and ferocious.
We're not just talking about angry parents writing letters to the editor this time. We're talking about the U.S. Senate getting involved.
Senator Joseph Lieberman.
He called them, and this is a direct quote, the sickest group ever promoted by a mainstream record company. You had the American Family Association handing out pamphlets at their concerts, claiming the band sacrificed live animals on stage and engaged in bestiality.
Total fabricates.
Complete nonsense. But it brings us right back to that forbidden fruit idea from his childhood. The more the senator screamed, the more records he sold.
He became the official enemy of the state, which is exactly what a disaffected teenager in 1996 wanted to listen to. He was validating all their anger and alienation.
He was their champion.
But then 1998 rolls around. He's the biggest, most notorious shock rocker in the world. He releases Mechanical Animals, and people put the CD in. They're expecting more of that grinding industrial noise, and instead, they get glam rock.
This was a massive, massive risk, a huge pivot. He completely traded the torn tights and the stage rot for, like, sequined jumpsuits and feathers.
He became an alien.
He created a whole new character, Omega, this androgynous extraterrestrial. He was channeling David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust 100%.
But why? Why do that? Why mess with a formula that was so clearly working?
Because he was terrified of becoming a caricature. He said it explicitly in interviews. He said, I don't want to be a cartoon monster for the rest of my life. He wanted to prove he was a musician, a songwriter, not just a scarecrow.
And the music it's genuinely catchy. I mean, The Dope Show has a massive hook.
It's polished, it's slick. Lyrically, it's this big critique of the drug culture and superficiality of Hollywood. But the fan base was deeply divided.
I bet.
A lot of the metalheads felt totally betrayed. They called him a sellout. The album debuted at number 1, which was huge, but it actually sold fewer copies in the long run than Antichrist Superstar. It alienated part of his core audience.
It's interesting, though, because looking back now, a lot of critics point to Mechanical Animals as his best musical work. It's aged surprisingly well.
It has. It showed he had range and that there was more to him than just shock value. But that artistic evolution was cut short by an event that he had absolutely nothing to do with, but that ended up defining his legacy forever.
Columbine, April 20th, 1999.
We have to slow down here because this is the moment where the whole Marilyn Manson project stops being fun and games and performance art. This is where it gets real.
The shooting happens. 2 students kill 12 of their classmates and a teacher before killing themselves. And almost immediately, the news media, desperate for a simple answer, starts saying
they were wearing Marilyn Manson T-shirts.
Which was false.
Completely false.
They were super fans. They were obsessed with his music.
Also false. The police investigation later showed that the shooters, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, actually disliked Manson's music. They thought he was too commercial, too mainstream.
They listened to German industrial bands like KMFDM and Rammstein.
Right. But the truth didn't matter, not in that moment. The narrative was set in stone within hours. America needed a reason why 2 of its suburban kids would do this, and Marilyn Manson was the perfect, easy answer.
It was a full-blown moral panic. The heat on him was intense. He had Bill O'Reilly on Fox News. The 24-hour news cycle was just relentless.
Politicians were sending letters to his record label, Seagram, demanding they stop distributing his music. The mayor of Denver successfully petitioned to get his upcoming concert in the city canceled.
And Manson says later in his book that this effectively destroyed his career. He went from being a notorious rock star to being an absolute pariah overnight. He was getting death threats.
But this is also where he showed his intellect again. He didn't just hide. He fought back. He wrote an op-ed for Rolling Stone magazine.
Yeah, titled Columbine, Whose Fault Is It?
Exactly.
I went back and read that piece for this deep dive. It is incredibly lucid and well-argued. He basically says the media is the one to blame.
He pointed out the staggering hypocrisy. The news was broadcasting the shooters' faces and names 204/7, making them famous, giving them the exact infamy they craved. And yet they were blaming a musician for influencing violence.
He argued the news was creating a culture of fear because fear sells advertisements and gets ratings.
And then came the interview in Michael Moore's documentary, Bowling for Columbine.
That was a huge turning point for a lot of skeptics, I think.
It really was. Moore sits down with him and asks him, if you were to talk to the kids at Columbine and the people in that community, what would you say to them?
And Manson just pauses for a long time, and then he says,
I wouldn't say a single word to them. I would listen to what they have to say, and that's what no one did.
It was such a surprisingly human, empathetic response. It completely disarmed his critics. It made the protesters holding signs outside his shows look like the irrational ones.
It legitimized him in a way nothing else could have. He went from being a cartoon villain to a serious spokesperson for free speech. And his response album, Holy Wood, was a direct result of that. It was a return to that heavy, angry sound, but the anger was focused entirely on this experience, on being the scapegoat, on being the nail that sticks out and gets hammered down.
But before we move on from this, I want to touch on something else in the scapegoat file, because Columbine wasn't the only time he was blamed for a crime he had nothing to do with.
No, the media developed a really ugly pattern. It was like every time a troubled teenager dressed in black did something terrible, Manson's name was the first one they reached for.
There was the murder of a nun in Italy.
Yes, and the Jody Jones murder in Scotland in 2003. The killer in that case, Luke Mitchell, had bought a Manson album a few days before the murder.
And the tabloids just ran with it.
They ran with it, implying the music made him do it, as if a CD can possess someone.
And then there were school shootings in Cleveland in 2007 and again in Louisiana in 2009.
And in both of those cases, the perpetrators either wore a Manson shirt or referenced him. It became this awful, self-fulfilling prophecy because the media had already labeled him the patron saint of school shooters. So troubled kids who wanted that kind of notoriety started identifying with him to fit the role. It's a tragic, vicious loop.
So he survives Columbine. He keeps touring, keeps making music. But as we move into the 2000s, he starts branching out. He wants to be seen as more than just a musician. He wants to be a multimedia artist.
He starts painting watercolors of all things.
Yeah, that's surprising.
And again, you might expect him to just, splash some blood on a canvas and call it a day, but he was serious about it. He actually collaborated on an exhibition with the filmmaker David Lynch.
Although the notes here say his early sales strategy was, let's say, unconventional.
Yes. He apparently traded some of his early paintings to drug dealers. Like, here's a watercolor of a mutilated body. Can I have some cocaine?
That absolutely tracks with the persona.
But art critics were genuinely split on his work. Some dismissed it as just, celebrity scribbles that were only valuable because of his name. But others, including critics at the New York Times, admitted there was a real aesthetic there. It was grotesque, for sure, but he had a distinct and recognizable style.
And he had a name for it.
He called the whole movement the Celebrtarian Corporation. And the slogan was, "We will sell our shadow to those who stand within it."
Which is both profound and incredibly creepy.
It's very consistent with his whole worldview. He's obsessed with this idea of fame as a commodity that eats you alive, that your shadow, your image, becomes more valuable than your actual self.
And then there's the acting. He makes his debut in a David Lynch film, Lost Highway.
A perfect fit. Lynch's surrealism and Manson's aesthetic are a match made in heaven. Or hell.
But he also popped up in some surprisingly mainstream stuff. He played a white supremacist leader, Ron Tully, in the final season of Sons of Anarchy.
He was a barber/surgeon in the horror show Salem.
He even played himself in Californication. He clearly enjoyed dipping his toe into the Hollywood machine he was always criticizing.
And we can't forget the booze. He launched his own brand of absinthe. He called it Mansan.
Of course he did.
Which, and this is the crazy part, actually won a gold medal at the 2008 San Francisco World Spirits Competition. It wasn't just some cheap cash grab. It was apparently a legitimately decent product. Critics initially called the taste plain, but the judges at the competition disagreed.
So by the mid-2000s, he's sort of settled into this new role as an elder statesman of goth. He isn't terrifying grandmothers anymore. He's winning awards for his looker, and he's dating movie stars.
And those relationships are absolutely key to understanding the next and most difficult phase of his life.
Right. The romances, all very high profile.
First, there was Rose McGowan in the late 90s. They were engaged. That ended with them citing lifestyle differences.
Vendita Von Teese,
the burlesque queen. This was arguably his aesthetic peak. The two of them together looked like a living art project. They got married in a castle in Ireland in 2005. The ceremony was officiated by Alejandro Jodorowsky, the legendary avant-garde director. It was all very high concept.
But it didn't last long. Divorced in 2007.
Dita cited his partying and his relationship with another woman as the reasons. And that other woman was Evan Rachel Wood.
And we really need to flag the age gap here.
It is significant, and it's a critical part of what comes next. When their relationship was made public in 2007, he was 38 years old. She was 19.
At the time, the media mostly treated it as just another rock star dating a young actress story. It wasn't really questioned.
No. But looking back now, through the lens of 2026 and the hashtag #MeToo movement, that power dynamic it's glaring. It's impossible to ignore.
Their relationship was famously tumultuous. On again, off again. They got engaged, then they broke it off.
And eventually, he marries a photographer named Lindsay Usich in a private ceremony during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. But just as it seems like he might be settling down again, the bottom completely falls out of his world.
This brings us to section 6 of our outline, and this is by far the heaviest part of the entire story, the reckoning. Because for a very long time, Marilyn Manson seemed Teflon. He had survived the Christians, the Senate, the Columbine blame, but in February of 2021, the allegations started.
And this time, they didn't come from a religious group or a concerned politician. They came from the women he had been with.
Evan Rachel Wood posted a statement on her Instagram account.
It was brief, but it was absolutely devastating. She named Brian Warner Marilyn Manson as the man who had horrifically abused her for years. She claims she was brainwashed and manipulated into submission.
And she wasn't alone.
No. Within days, 4 other women came forward with their own very similar stories. And eventually, the number of accusers grew to around 16 people.
We need to be specific about what was being alleged here, because abuse is a very broad term.
The allegations were severe. We were talking about claims of sexual assault, physical violence, anti-Semitic and racist abuse, and intense psychological torture.
And that detail about the room in his house.
Several women described a small, soundproofed glass room in his West Hollywood home that he allegedly called the bad girl's room.
The bad girl's room.
And he would allegedly lock them in there for hours as a form of punishment if they misbehaved.
That detail. It sounds like something straight out of one of his music videos. It's surreal.
And that's the deeply disturbing part. The line between his grotesque art and his actual life seemed to have dissolved completely if these allegations were true.
So how did the industry react? Because usually these things can take time to process. There's an investigation.
This was instantaneous. His record label, Loma Vista, dropped him within 24 hours. His talent agency, CAA, dropped him. He was edited out of episodes of the TV shows American Gods and Creepshow that he was supposed to appear in. It was a complete and total industry blackout.
Now, Manson didn't stay silent through all of this. He denied everything.
Vehemently. He released a statement calling the claims horrible distortions of reality. His core defense was that his life is intentionally controversial and provocative art, but his intimate relationships were always entirely consensual with like-minded partners.
And then he went on the offensive legally. He filed a defamation lawsuit against Evan Rachel Wood, and the details of that suit they're wild.
It reads like a spy thriller. He sued Wood and another woman, an artist named Ilma Gore. He claimed that they had conspired to recruit other women to make false allegations against him.
But it went further than that.
It did. He alleged that they impersonated an FBI agent, writing forged letters from the Bureau to make it look like he was under a federal investigation.
Impersonated FBI agents.
That was the claim, to pressure other women into making claims against him. He also alleged they hacked his personal accounts to manufacture evidence. He was trying to completely flip the narrative, to paint himself as the victim of a coordinated malicious plot.
So how did that hold up in court?
Mostly it didn't. a judge threw out the most significant parts of that lawsuit under what are called anti-SLAPP statutes.
Can you just quickly explain anti-SLAPP for us? It's a term we hear a lot, but maybe don't fully get.
Sure. SLAPP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. It's basically when a rich or powerful person sues someone with less power, like a journalist or an activist, just to shut them up or drain their bank account with legal fees, even if the lawsuit has no real merit.
So anti-SLAPP laws are there to protect free speech.
Exactly. And the judge in this case ruled that Manson couldn't prove Wood's statements were made with actual malice, and that the Wilder conspiracy claims just didn't have enough evidence to proceed. He was even ordered to pay her legal fees for those parts of the suit. He eventually just dropped the rest of the lawsuit in late 2024.
So the big defamation suit against his accusers failed. But what about the other side? The actual lawsuits against him from these women?
It's a really mixed bag of legal outcomes, which is what makes the truth so hard to parse for the public. It's not a clean story.
Several of the lawsuits were dismissed?
Right. Ashley Morgan Smithline's suit was dismissed, and then she actually later recanted her allegations entirely. She came out and claimed that she had been manipulated by Evan Rachel Wood into lying. That was a major, major win for Manson's defense team.
And the suit from his former assistant, Ashley Walters.
That was a legal roller coaster. It was dismissed, then it was reinstated on appeal regarding the idea of suppressed memories, and then it was ultimately dismissed for good in December of 2025.
But there were settlements too, which is different.
Very different. Esme Bianco, the actress from Game of Thrones, had sued him for sexual assault and human trafficking. She settled out of court with him in early 2023. And another lawsuit from a Jane Doe was also settled right before it was set to go to trial.
And settlements are tricky. They aren't an admission of guilt.
Not legally, no. But they usually involve paying a significant amount of money to make the case go away. It stops all the details from being aired publicly in a courtroom. It's a form of risk management.
But the biggest question mark hanging over all of this was the criminal investigation.
Absolutely. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department spent 4 years investigating him. This wasn't a civil suit about money. This was about potential jail time.
And what was the result?
In 2025, the investigation finally concluded, and no criminal charges were filed.
Why? If there were so many accusers with similar stories?
The district attorney's office cited 2 main reasons. The first was the statute of limitations. Many of the alleged incidents happened in the late 2000s or early 2010s, and legally, in California, too much time had passed to prosecute them as crimes.
The clock had run out. And the second reason?
Insufficient evidence.
And we need to be really clear about what that means. Insufficient evidence in a criminal context does not mean it didn't happen.
Correct. It is not an exoneration. It means the prosecutor looked at all the evidence they had and said, I do not believe I can prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury of 12 people.
And that's a very high bar.
It's the highest bar in the legal system. And in he said, she said, cases involving past relationships, especially with a public figure known for embracing BDSM and rough sex, proving criminal non-consent years after the fact is incredibly difficult.
So he avoided prison, he settled some of the civil cases, he won others by dismissal. Where does that leave him now in 2026?
It leaves him in a kind of public relations limbo, but it's a limbo that he is actively trying to break out of. In the last couple of years, we've seen a very clear comeback attempt.
He started releasing new music again.
Yep. A song called As Sick as the Secrets Within in 2024, and another one called Raise the Red Flag.
And he's back to touring.
He went on a big arena tour opening for the band Five Finger Death Punch in 2024. He's headlining his own shows in Europe in 2025. It seems he signed a new record deal with a label called Nuclear Blast. He's moving forward.
And he's had some support from some of his peers.
Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins has been a vocal supporter, and most notably, Kanye West, or Ye, as he goes by now.
That collaboration on the Donda albums was a huge statement.
It was. It was Manson, standing on a replica of Kanye's childhood home porch next to Kanye and the rapper Davey, who was also in the middle of a controversy. Felt like a gathering of the canceled.
A deliberate provocation.
For sure. Kanye seems drawn to figures who are rejected by mainstream society. It was a very visual signal that Manson wasn't going to hide. He was going to lean into the exile.
So the big question is, does the audience care about any of this? Are they coming back?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer seems to be, it's divided. There is a segment of his old fan base that truly believes it's all a conspiracy. that he's being targeted because he's a controversial man or because he's Manson. And then there's another segment that just practices the separate the art from the artist mantra.
They just like the songs and they don't want to know about the man behind them.
Exactly.
It brings us right back to the central conflict of his entire life, doesn't it? His entire career was built on blurring the line between fantasy and reality. He told us he was the Antichrist. He told us he was a villain.
And when a significant number of people finally turned around and said, okay, we believe you, you're a bad guy, he suddenly turned around and said, wait, no, hold on, that was just a character. The real Brian Warner is a gentle, misunderstood artist.
It's the ultimate boy who cried wolf, but the wolf is his own persona.
It is. If you spend 30 years screaming at the world that you are the living embodiment of evil, you can't really be surprised when people start to assume you're capable of doing evil things. It's the inherent danger of living your entire life as a performance art piece about depravity. At some point, people stop seeing the irony.
So when you look at the whole timeline, from the Christian schoolboy in Ohio to the accused predator in Hollywood, what's the final takeaway? What is Marilyn Manson to American culture?
I think he's a mirror. He's always been a mirror. In the 90s, the culture was gripped by a moral panic about Satanism and its effect on the youth, so he became the Antichrist.
Right.
In the late 90s and early 2000s, we were terrified of gun violence and what was happening in our schools, so he became the scapegoat for Columbine. And in the 2020s, our culture is finally having a massive, painful reckoning with abuse, power dynamics, and gender, and now he has become the face of that conversation. He just reflects our deepest fears back at us in every era.
And perhaps he's a warning. A warning that if you wear a mask long enough, eventually it starts to eat into your face. You can't tell where the mask ends and you begin.
We will sell our shadow to those who stand within it. That was his old slogan for his art movement.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, he sold his shadow and eventually the bill came due.
There's this one quote from Manson I read once that I think just sums it all up so perfectly. He said he trademarked the name Marilyn Manson the same way that Walt Disney trademarked the name Mickey Mouse.
It's a product, a brand name.
It is. And the one lingering question that I can't shake is this. Did Brian Warner lose control of the monster he created? Or was the controversy, the pain, the lawsuits, the outrage, was that always the only product that really mattered in the first place?
That is something I think the listener is going to have to decide for themselves.
A very heavy story, but a necessary deep dive, I think.
Absolutely. It's a timeline of our own cultural anxieties.
To you, the learner, thank you for sticking with us through this very complex and very messy history. What do you think? Is it possible to separate the art from the artist when the art itself is the artist's life? Let us know. Until next time.